I want to bring in NBC's Ryan Riley. Harry Litman is a former U.S. attorney and host of the Talking Feds podcast. Sapna Maheshwari is a New York Times reporter who covers TikTok. And NBC's Brian Chung will join me here in studio. Okay, Brian, let's start. You're right here.
Yeah.
I understand we just heard from TikTok. What do they think about all this?
Yeah, well, look, TikTok just issuing its statement via TikTok. The TikTok U.S. CEO saying basically that he hopes President Trump comes in to save the day. Take a listen.
On behalf of everyone at TikTok and all our users across the country, I want to thank President Trump for his commitment to work with us to find a solution that keeps TikTok available in the United States.
Adding later that he said, rest assured, we will do everything in our power to ensure our platform thrives. The reason why he's issuing this statement is because with the Biden administration essentially handing off the football to the Trump administration to cross us over from when the ban would take effect on Sunday into Monday, TikTok is asking Trump, who's basically holding the keys to TikTok's fate, to do something about it. Now, here's the question, Chris. What could the incoming president do? That's an open question because this is a law that was signed by Congress, passed by President Biden, and upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. There's some maneuvering that the president could do with perhaps saying something that is a qualified divestiture that would allow TikTok to continue operating. It would conceivably take time to make that happen, but a lot of questions over whether or not TikTok will still function once we get to Sunday.
All right, so Ryan, what more can you tell us about the Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court said that there is no doubt that for more than 170 million Americans, TikTok offers a distinctive and expansive outlet for expression, means of engagement, and source of community. But Congress has determined that divestiture is necessary to address its well-supported national security concerns regarding TikTok's data collection practices and relationship with the foreign adversary. For the foregoing reasons, we conclude that the challenged provisions do not violate the petitioner's First Amendment right. So essentially what you have there is this notion that they were focused on those national security things. The Supreme Court actually sort of set aside the other issue that the government brought up here, talking about this notion that TikTok could be used sort of as a propaganda tool to convince, Americans. That was not really necessarily what they focused on. It was that data collection, that all of that information being in a foreign, accessible at least to a foreign adversary is really what they focused on. And, this has been something that the national security community has been, really focused on for a very long time. And there's pretty widespread agreement within the intelligence community about this issue overall. But of course, you have this enormous base of support, particularly young people who are very interested in this app and use it on a daily basis. You have all these businesses who are tied to it. So it's this very complicated issue. But, practically speaking, even though everyone's known this is coming for so long, this has been the date on the calendar, the federal government isn't going to open on the next business day until Donald Trump is in office. So even though it is on paper that this is, effective on Sunday, really it would only be 36 hours until Donald Trump is president. And we don't even know who the acting attorney general is going to be when Donald Trump becomes president. We don't know who are be in a lot of these key positions. So that's sort of the situation that we're in. And I think that that's what the Biden administration is doing here, particularly in those final hours when there's so much that, you're trying to get over the door last minute to not be able to, focus on this at a moment when the federal government really isn't necessarily operating at full speed on a Sunday, Chris.
Yeah, and Harry, obviously, you have a new administration coming in, so you do have all those issues that Ryan just talked about. So that's the administration side, but let's talk about the court side. They obviously were not persuaded by the First Amendment issues here. Why not?
Well, for actually varying reasons. So the 19-page opinion actually offers different reasons. Some said even under the highest scrutiny, this would pass because the foreign risk is so high. Others would say it's not quite the highest scrutiny, so under intermediate scrutiny, it passes. The main thing is the court issuing a per curiam, speaking in one voice. Could I speak a little to what Trump might do?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so it's not so easy. The Congress has passed this law. Presidents cannot just disregard them. As Ryan said, there's a possibility of saying a qualified divestiture. And, Trump has had a kind of casual relationship with the truth for years, but he would have to make a proclamation to Congress that in essence would be a lie. There's no possibility come Monday that there's a buyer on the horizon and they're just working out the details. ByteDance itself and China say we'll never sell. He could try to issue a different executive order saying, I just declare that this is not enforced, but there's very strong law there saying, especially in the face of a countermand by Congress, you can't do it. And I think he'll be sued immediately. So I know he thinks of himself, maybe the country does, as the great deal maker coming in to save the day. But his legal restrictions, and this is what we're watching as he takes office, really don't give him a lot of operating room.
All right, Sapna, you know this issue as well as anyone. You've written about it extensively. So where does this go from here, from the people you're talking to? What seems likely?
I mean, in the near term, it does seem like TikTok is not going to be working the way we know it as of Sunday. And, to everyone else's point who's just spoken, there's really limits to what Trump can do legally. This law is very specific. It gave TikTok and ByteDance the challenge to sell in 270 days. And the company took a different kind of bet. It bet that it could overcome this law in courts, and now it is really scrambling, looking for a Hail Mary. And I think this is just hitting the app like crazy. Like, users have been hearing about a potential ban since 2020. And for some reason, this one it never sank in until this week.
Harry, Donald Trump posted that his administration, he is reviewing the situation. They're going to make a decision on TikTok in the not so distant future. So if he wants to keep TikTok alive, what do you give his chances as? What does seem to you like the most likely outcome here?
Okay, well, let's start with I must have time to review the situation. He does not have that time. By the time he takes office, it will already be the law. Chris, it is really a test of how brazen and indifferent to legal prohibitions he's going to be, which is a much broader theme going forward. I think the qualified divestiture provision, meaning there's somebody on the horizon who's ready to buy, that just can't happen. Truthfully, nobody will step forward. So if he tries to do something, it'll be to sort of bully through I hereby suspend. And that will engage the law that I just talked about executive orders trying to countermand Congress. My best guess is he tries to do something because it's so much about his deal-making prowess. Plus, he's so cozy now with the CEO of TikTok. But I think he'll fail.
Where does this leave, Brian? Companies like Google and Apple, right? They provide this. They're a conduit for this. What do they do now?
Yeah, and actually, those companies are critical to the way that the law was going to take effect, which is that if the law is upheld, which it was today, as the Supreme Court said, that Apple and Google cannot provide services to TikTok, which is designated as a company that's attached to a foreign adversary by the statute. So on Sunday, that's the law as read. But you heard the Biden administration saying they don't really plan on enforcing that on Sunday because, again, they want to hand off this statutory hot potato to the Trump administration once they take office on Monday. So it sounds like on Sunday there will not be this pursuing of these fines that are written into the law that a company like Apple or a company like Google would be hit with if they continue to offer TikTok as a, let's say, for example, downloadable app in their app stores and the Google Play Store. So that means that for Sunday, it should mostly be okay. That also applies to companies like Oracle, which hosts the servers that essentially allow TikTok to continue scrolling for those that have them on their phones. So it doesn't sound like Sunday will have any sort of interruptions, but beyond that is an open question because it depends on how the incoming president is going to define not just what his view is of the law, how the DOJ is going to enforce this, and then also whether or not the servers or the companies that work on a third-party basis with TikTok would have legal protection if they do continue to provide TikTok with services. That's an open question.
Yeah, one of the things we've seen is that social media users, Sapna, can be very adaptable, right? We saw it with Twitter, folks moving on to other places, and now TikTok alternatives. They're already moving to other apps. Two of the ones that are most frequently mentioned are Lemonade and RedNote. Those are also owned by Chinese companies. So that begs the question, could we see the same problems crop up there, just on a different platform?
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, and this law leaves open the possibility of kind of taking similar actions against Chinese companies in the future. The law specifically identifies the countries affected as China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. So definitely possible. This current law actually does affect Lemon 8 because it's owned by ByteDance. But I mean, it brings up this other point, which is for every day that TikTok is potentially not working properly or not available or updating, that's a big deal in the world of technology where users and attention time is everything. So I think that introduces more questions for TikTok's business, too.
Oh, boy. Sapna Maheshwari, Ryan Riley, Harry Litman, and Brian. Okay, Harry, real quick.
Congress is maybe doing a solution to pass the 90 days that Trump can't do on his own.
All right. Time will tell. Thank you all very much.